Hello, everyone. I hope you can hear me. Welcome to today's webinar. Thank you so much for tuning in. We'll be covering the 2024 NEOGOV hiring report and discussing the fragile future of public sector recruitment today. And there we go. My name is Stephanie Tracy Kalash. I'm the Director of Corporate Marketing here at NEOGOV. I'm thrilled to be here with all of you today, and equally as thrilled to have our very own Chief Human Resource Officer, Reed Walsh, joining me today. I'll let Reed introduce herself. Hi, Reed.
Stephanie, thank you. Hello to everybody. Good to be here today. I'm sort of smiling when I look at that picture of me because that was actually the picture that was taken very soon into my job as a Deputy Secretary for Human Resources and Management in the Commonwealth of Pennsylvania. I recently came to NEOGOV to do their HR work, but spent about 7+ years running HR for the Commonwealth, 8 years in the agency that did HR, IT, and continuity of government for the Commonwealth. So I very much empathize and feel your challenges. HR is difficult, I can tell you from having done both. HR and government is really hard. So glad to be here today, and hopefully we can provide some insights that help you navigate.
Awesome. Thank you so much, Reed. I'm so excited to hear you present. Before you do, and before we both start digging into the data a little bit, I wanted to just set the stage for everyone quickly. So as I mentioned earlier, we've dubbed this year's hiring report the fragile future of public sector recruitment. And we've done that because, as many of you have experienced firsthand, I'm sure, the public sector has really been faced with significant hiring deficits over the past couple of years. This year, when we sat down to develop our annual report, we were pleased to see that the overall trend in public sector hiring is looking positive. That being said, the future is fragile, and it's fragile because government applications are still down nearly 10% from pre-pandemic levels, and specific roles are continuing to face the same challenges that have plagued you all for the last few years. Like always, we gathered this data and information from both our NEOGOV Insight database of over 45 million public sector job applications and through survey responses of public sector job seekers, government HR professionals, and state and local leaders. At the end of the session, we'll have time for questions, but throughout the webinar, if you have any questions, feel free to use the chat. I'll be monitoring it, but I'm going to keep it rolling on the hiring landscape a little bit here for a minute. As I mentioned just a moment ago, things are looking positive, and we know that because of some of the data we were able to pull this year. So the number of open jobs decreased by almost 2.5% from 2022 to 2023. Whereas the number of applicants per job increased by over 20% in just the last year. So that's positive news because it means that, you know, we're getting more applications, more interest in the public sector, and roles are being filled. That being said, applicants per open job during that same time period, while increasing, you can see that sort of incremental increase in the bottom portion of this graph here, we're still down about 10% from pre-pandemic levels. So still very slowly climbing out of the trench that we've been in the public sector. Additionally, when we surveyed all of the HR professionals, like all of you, we learned that, you know, you're all saying that hiring is not getting easier. More than half of you have said that just over the last year, while again those numbers look promising, hiring is still a really significant challenge, and it's definitely for a number of different reasons, some of which Reed will get into, but it is continuing to plague all of you. And part of the reason is likely because when you break down the data by quartile, just 2023's application data by quartile, you can see that some of the hardest to fill roles are really only receiving about 4 applications per job. the average application is up, the average number of applications is up, and some are getting over 100 apps, which causes, problems of its own in being, potentially unmanageable for all of you in your agencies. But that fourth quartile, just having a few apps, is really tricky. And even when adjusting for qualified candidates, that number shrinks to only like 1.5 apps per job, and that's just not doable. Additionally, to add some more fun friction to the overall workforce landscape at the moment in the public sector is the reality of the silver tsunami. I'm sure most of you know, but the baby boomer generation is beginning their sort of wave of retirements. When we surveyed the HR professionals and industry leaders, we learned that while 50% or so have retired all or half of their anticipated retirees, that leaves another 50% or so that are still in the process of retiring. So we're going to continue to see that those exits from the industry over the next several years, and that's going to continue to pose challenges as we start to need to fill those roles. Over to you, Reed.
Thank you. So an interesting part of the silver tsunami is I feel like when I first started my career in HR, it was a silver tsunami. We talked about it a lot, but we never really felt it hit. It was always a thing, and maybe you saw it in pockets in your certain agencies or certain areas of your workforce. But I think COVID really changed that. I think people did make some decisions. If they were called to be returned to the office, some people decided to not do that. And I think that started a motion in place, and it's still going. And the reflexive part of that is, so we need to hire new people, younger generation most likely. What are they looking for in jobs? So let's talk about some of those challenges. So let's talk about the top reasons for voluntary turnover. Last year, the two leading causes of job openings were retirement and voluntary turnover. So why are people leaving? I know in large organizations, it's really hard to do exit surveys for everyone. I try to sit on every exit survey I possibly can to gather information, but don't worry, we gathered it some here for you. Compensation, 60% of the reason. Competition with private sector jobs, and that could be somewhere with compensation as well. Growth opportunities, what is the career path? Am I going to need for that one person to retire that's sort of ahead of me in government, and I don't see a way around that, and that's going to be a long time, so I decided to leave. Competition with other government jobs. So I felt that when I was in the Commonwealth. If you're in state government, are you competing with the counties for jobs? Are you competing with other local governments in states or in large local governments? Are you competing for the same jobs in different agencies or different areas of the business? So a lot of that cannibalization from within. We saw a lot of that turnover when it comes to like administrative support, administrative work, and finance work as well. Remote work. The world's going a little bit more hybrid. Some areas of the government sectors have been able to adopt or quick to adopt, but I think we all know that there are some jobs that are just in person. 70% of the jobs in the Commonwealth of Pennsylvania when I was there, they were in person. Even through the pandemic, they were in person. That's a real thing. People are looking for a little bit more balance and remote work availability. Job location, again, like that's another reason to leave. And benefits being lowest does not terribly surprise me, because don't erode your benefits. It's a big reason, it's a big attractor for people to come to work. We know that by looking at the data. So most agencies did rank compensation as the key driver for voluntary turnover, but your agency may be limited its ability to increase compensation. So look at other things, career development, and we'll talk about that in the next section as we go along. So let's look a little bit more at the data. Hard to fill jobs. All right. So similar to last year's report, survey respondents said the hardest to fill qualified candidates, and I'm very curious if you all recognize this, if you're part of these hiring sects, so feel free to put it in the chat, thumbs it up, yes indeed. Law enforcement, engineering and planning, utilities and trade, information technology, and then that other bucket was a mixture of, and Stephanie can help me here, but those were some administrative jobs, some financial jobs. What else did we see in that other bucket, Stephanie?
Yeah, we saw, interestingly, public works made up the biggest portion of that other data, as well as judicial and legal coming in second. So different court roles, as well as attorneys and some financial jobs after that as well.
Thank you for that. I'm sure that sounds familiar to a lot of you. So between 2019 and 2023, there was a 40% increase in the number of job openings for police officers at the top of our list there at law enforcement. But at the same time, the number of applications for the jobs decreased by 39%. So the need is there, the need is increasing, the job applications are increasing or decreasing.
Yeah, and to let you know too, Reed, the chat agreed with you, or agreed with us and the data.
Yep. Okay. It's mirroring what's really happening. That's good. The number of open civil service engineering jobs jumped by 32% during that time period. I think we all know what that's about. There was a lot of money to build and to create new things from the federal government that rolled down into states, building roads, building infrastructure. We need engineers to do that sort of thing, and so that jumped way up, and that's huge competition with the private sector. Interestingly enough, the number of people viewing the job postings in law enforcement and civil engineering did increase, but the view to apply conversion rate was worse than it was before. So there's a lot of work to be done there. So with access to this understanding of all the data, we can make more strategic recruitment decisions. All right, so low to view apply rates. So we just talked about this. So despite the 23% increase in the number of application views, view to apply rate conversions decreased in 2023. So people are taking a look. We got their attention, but we are not getting that first date. They are not applying. So reach, the number of views a posting receives. Attractiveness is really how many conversions or applications the posting receives. So how do you fix your job? If your job posting is not getting views, you need to focus on better branding and advertising as a part of those roles. If your job posting is not converting, then we have a different set of issues. Then we really need to revisit the job itself and possibly look at the requirements and adjust the minimum qualifications. My guess is, and again, I would love to see this in the chat so we have a feel for it, that a lot of you are already engaged in that type of work. Whether it's the rebranding work, give a hey ya in the chat if you're doing the rebranding work. My guess is you've been doing that for years, trying to keep up with what's attractive to candidates. And I would imagine a lot of you are revisiting the job itself. There's a lot of conversation around skills-based hiring. And then just generally, if we're struggling to get employees, what do we need to do to those qualifications and perhaps take up the training part once they're in the door? So I think one of the most important things to think about as you're kind of ruminating on your environment as we present this data is, if you don't have easy access to the data, this may be a good place to start. Start with the data. The more data you have, the better you can make strategic decisions. So now we've talked about some of the specific challenges. What impact does it have on your agency? So staff burnout, turnover, increased overtime. I know that can be really costly, something you didn't necessarily plan for. Increased pay ranges. And we know that in government, oftentimes that can be difficult because maybe you're waiting for a budget cycle to happen in order to do those increases. Perhaps that you need to bargain those increases. There are a lot of things that can hold up the desire and even sort of the plan to increase those pay ranges. But we know that that's definitely an impact, needing to increase those. Project delays. If you don't have the staff, you can't do the project. Also, if you in HR, just reflecting on your workday, like think about how much time you may have to spend solving more of these hiring challenges, and then those other projects, that's the strategic work that you want to get to, it goes by the wayside because you just don't have as much staff as you used to. Additional training. So obviously, if you're turning people over faster, you need to do hiring. Cutbacks in services. I think that's probably the saddest one of all to think about is, as HR for government, we want to make sure that we're providing the people to do the services, so ultimately we can do those things that we should be delivering to citizens. So I think cutbacks in services is the hard one. It was always hard for me to hear about, from our Veterans Affairs office, that's great, we're doing a great job, we've really increased nurses hiring, but we would like to open more beds. We don't want to be turning people away. So that's a tough one for us emotionally as HR providers in the public sector. Shared employees, so you're kind of splitting employees' duties, and shared services. Shared services is something that I went through in the Commonwealth, and it's very difficult to implement, and I would say difficult to manage, but sometimes it's a necessity of being able to share the work so you can continue to provide the service. So the road to success, it may seem daunting. Sorry, we weren't trying to bring you down, but we do have some hiring solutions to help you navigate the challenges and attract the qualified candidates. So let's talk about strategies to address some of your immediate challenges and help build your foundation for future recruitment. Expand job sourcing. So if what you're doing isn't working, you need to try something new. You need to expand your horizons, tap into other talent pools. I feel like many of you are already doing these things, so it may be validation to the things that you're doing. We hope that you're tracking the data and you can see some of those things you're doing, or it may be an awareness of, we really should go that route as well in terms of strategies. So ways to expand job sourcing. Sourcing active candidates or job seekers who are actively looking is the most common way. So your candidates are out there, they're looking, you want to take your job postings, make sure they're understandable, make sure they're attractive, you're highlighting the benefits, and you're looking for those active candidates. Passive candidates. Candidates are those who are not actively looking for a job, but they say, if a job catches my attention and it came as a recommendation for a friend, outreach from a recruiter, or some other personal network, that's a good way to go. It's a productive use of time. If a passive candidate isn't really ready at that time to leave their employer, you never know what's going to happen in the future. Maybe they'll be ready in a few months. Leverage your database of past applicants. This is huge. So if they've come, if they filled out the application, if they're in your system, if we're on their radar, and maybe for whatever reasons they didn't get the job, your past applicants is a great way to go after your current openings. So with software solutions like Attract, NEOGOV's Candidate Relationship Manager, you never have to start sourcing from the scratch. It gives you that database of people, past applicants, automated tools for connecting them. It's something that can work in the background while you guys are working in the forefront. 60% of agencies said they're sourcing trainable candidates to expand their talent pool. This is a smart technique to gain new applicants. We look for those skills, those innate things that, I like just like the way they came across. I believe that they're trainable. They have this work that maybe the skills translate, even though it's not the same subject matter. This is a really smart way to gain applicants. And lastly, you may be able to get top talent from less traditional groups, if they are, because there's less competition for these folks. So I think this is where a lot of the skills-based hiring, the shifting to looking at skills and experience instead of these precise credentials. I know there's a lot of conversation, at least at the state level. Before I left, and currently I just attended a conference for the National Governors Association with a lot of your state colleagues, and a lot of conversation about skills-based hiring. And I think the surprising thing is there are people that we find to be qualified, but we have these degree requirements that are either a requirement that we should consider taking away, and or if we have equivalencies or substitutes, let's think about how we're advertising that job. How are we writing that to highlight the fact that your doors are open to people that have equivalencies to that experience and not just that college degree. All right, so just a double click on that. So the importance of skill-based hiring. So agencies are widening their pool by looking at interns, retirees, past candidates, even part-time workers. The reason this is really important, the reason skill-based hiring is really important is, as you can see on the slide, 50%, 52% of job seekers, your job seekers, according to our data, have started the government application but have not finished it because they are feeling, as they go to complete it, they don't get it, they don't understand it, and they're feeling unqualified. If they're intimidated by the job application, if they see that requirement, if they don't have listed first, even if there are other equivalencies, it's going to turn them away. They're going to abandon it, and we're seeing high rates of not finishing. So by expanding job sourcing to include a wider range of skill sets, you can create a more robust, adaptable hiring practice. And as Stephanie alluded to earlier, that has its challenges too, right? So if we look at that top quartile of jobs, you have a lot of applicants. You can say, oh boy, I have to go through all of these. The conversion rate's really high. And then you have that low quartile of jobs. So maybe if you're starting your journey on skill-based, you're really trying to focus, right? Because we all know we cannot fix everything at once. So look at your data. Look at that fourth quartile of jobs. What is it? Is there anything you can do in terms of the minimum qualifications to start to bring people in, and then thinking about your training programs? I think that's a really important part of this. I was talking yesterday. I had the benefit of talking to a woman who runs the Civil Service Commission in Louisiana, and she was saying one of the things we feel like we need to get really good at is training. And training, not like in our HR traditional, like, the things that we need to do to prevent sexual harassment or that sort of thing, but really technical training for the job. How do we do it well? How do we use modern methods to do it? Because frankly, people are leaving more, we're hiring more, and we're also training quicker. So I think that's a thing, we want to put on our list as governments to focus on. All right. Agencies are widening. Oops. Let's see, sorry about that. So let's look at where we identified some of those talent pools, untraditional groups to expand the talent pool. So trainable candidates was high on the list. Interns, intern programs are great ways. Retirees, I think we all welcome people back who can help us come in, past applicants. Part-time workers. I don't know how many of you are able to sort of jump on part-time workers, people who are looking for a more gig type schedule. To fill those hard to fill roles. Maybe they're not going to do it for 8 hours a day, make unemployment compensation calls, but maybe they'll do it for 4.5 hours a day. And that really does help to reduce some of the backlog or workloads in your agency's workers over 50 and temps, et cetera. All right, so let's move on to the next best practice. Improving the job postings. All right, so how do we improve the job postings to make it more attractive to folks who are coming and looking at your sites and expand our talent pool? So writing a job description for job seekers. What is the employer value proposition? So what is your unique set of benefits and values that you offer to attract and retain the employees? How you're different and better than other employees. That's your employer value proposition. If you haven't done a lot of work on your employer value proposition, I highly suggest doing that. Making job descriptions more candidate friendly, and we know that people work because they are interested in the meaning of the job, and we know that they're interested in the benefits of the job. So making those more friendly and making those more obvious can increase applicants as much as 18%. And I'm going to talk in a second about some work that we did with a few states that got us to that number. So write the job descriptions for the job seeker, not the position. So what does everybody want to know? What's in it for me? Benefits, stability, meaningful work, work-life balance, career growth opportunities, and your culture. Right? So how many of you feel like you're doing a good job highlighting those in your job descriptions? When I was in the Commonwealth of Pennsylvania, it's huge. We do a ton of hiring. We were reviewing anywhere from 18,000 to 30,000 applications a month. And I really thought we were doing a pretty good job modernizing our job posts. And every once in a while I'm on a job site and I see, oh, we still list that job as an AO1. Like that's not user friendly. Like how do we keep doing this? People don't understand that. They can't translate that language. So interestingly enough, NEOGOV did an internal study with the Commonwealth of Pennsylvania. I don't believe I was there at the time where I was leaving, the state of Michigan and the state of Washington, and we took over 300 job descriptions and we wrote them to be more job seeker friendly. And we wanted to challenge our assumption that if this would really increase the number of job applicants. So on average, number of job applicants increased 18% for those rewritten posts, right? Again, it's up for you to decide where you feel like you need to see those big increases, where you need to lean in to starting that task of looking at your job postings and rewriting them. But we can say from our experience, you will see a jump, you will see an increase in the people that are looking at those jobs. So in order to write more job appealing descriptions, candidate friendly job descriptions, you want to understand what is most appealing to job seekers. So let's talk a little bit about the more appealing aspects according to the survey that we took. Job seekers have clear preferences. I'm sure you all feel them yourselves. Flexible work hours, that's at the top of the list. Remote options for work, 4-day work weeks, extra vacation days, bonus potential, pay for performance, and tuition reimbursement. When I was leaving the Commonwealth, we launched a program to partner with our state schools to offer a discount to employees for their kids or themselves who wanted to take online courses for school. It was a need that our universities had, our state system of education had. They wanted to increase the amount of people who were taking their online classes. We were a huge mechanism, because if you think about 72,000 employees potentially wanting more education and all of their children or dependents that they have and wanting more education, a really nice thing we could offer. And I was surprised about how symbiotic the partnership was. So ask those questions, have those conversations think about, what you can do in terms of tuition reimbursement, not just for your employees, but, potentially their dependents. I would suggest looking into that. So just finding these things that differentiate yourself as an employer, differentiate your agency, give that little competitive edge in the job applicant market is going to lend you some success. So the top 3 benefits, the top 3 best practices, flexible work hour, make your jobs less about getting work done and less about the 9-to-5 strict schedule. Remote work, let employees work remote. Maybe it's a certain number of days per week, like a Monday and a Friday. 4-day work weeks. I recently read an article in the Wall Street Journal where someone was talking, a local government was talking about doing 4-day work weeks and how well received it was and how happy they were with the results of it for those jobs that could be 4 days a week in terms of the productivity, not seeing a drop of productivity. Very brave, a lot of probably things to get through. They probably had a lot of right place, right time circumstances to allow them to state new rules like that. But definitely when people do those things, when you see results, this is something that you can take back to your employers. Hopefully you can reach out to your colleagues in these states or local governments where you're seeing this work being done and say, how did you do this? What were the issues? Do you mind if I have you talk to my X, Y, and Z person, if they have questions on your road to get there or your path? So definitely use each other as a port as you face these challenges. All right, optimizing the hiring process. So the top talent is in demand, it's in short supply, and we want to make sure that if they are coming into our pipeline, we are capitalizing on it, right? So we know that people are not converting in public sector as much as they are in private sector from viewing the job to looking at it. So we really need to start with that great job application and then creating the positive candidate experience. So let's talk about the job application and the hiring process. So half of job seekers have started and not finished, right? They said it was frustrating. The process was frustrating. That's why they jumped ship. And in fact, given this was my experience was that when I was in the Commonwealth, we did an experiment with college students. So we took some Penn State students at a local Penn State campus, and we actually did one of those focus groups where we had them do our job application process as we are thinking about making changes, and we sat behind the glass and listened to their comments about our process, and it was hard to hear. And we had the benefit of having this great partnership with Penn State to allow us to use their facilities and their facilitators to do that. But it was really surprising, the things I guess not surprising if I look at what our processes were, but it was hard to hear the things they had to say, but we got a lot out of that. They don't want complicated processes, right? They want a profile that saves their information. We are asking a lot of these applicants when they come in to do their jobs, we want to make it as streamlined as possible, and they want a profile that saves their information. If they're going to come back, they want to not have to fill all of that out again. They want to know it was quick and easy. They want quick response. That's a big thing, candidate touch. It's not foreign to you, but people want it. Definitely can validate that. The all online process, that's a big deal. It wasn't too long ago that we were sending out paper surveys in the Commonwealth of Pennsylvania to see if people were interested in jobs they'd already tested for. We made some changes, definitely saw the lift, but it's a real thing. Like, I think that it's easy to forget, how not that long ago or how currently, some people are operating on paper. So online, if you're not there, we can certainly help, but you definitely need to get there. They want it to be fast, simple, easy, no cover letter required. That is such a roadblock to some people to have to sit down and write a cover letter. They'd like to know the pay range from the start. Some of us have those requirements in our states, but that's very important. If you don't have the pay range, you're going to feel really leery about what they're getting into. And status updates, what's going on with the job. Nobody likes to not hear what's going on. So we know that through our survey that 41% of job seekers rate their experience applying for government jobs as average, 37% rate it as average or excellent, and 22% rate their experience as average or poor. And that's great news that we're getting those marks in the average and the average or excellent. But that 22%, when we're fighting hard for these candidates, that can make a big impact. So what are the worst parts? How many references you need, unknown salary range, not responding back, the process was too long, not hearing back, not being given feedback. If they do hear back, long applications, cover letters, and just reflexive of the things that are the best parts, poor communication and lack of updates. So these results can be synthesized into 4 overarching best practices. Let's take a look. Okay. So you can read these quotes, take a look and see if you can identify your agency in any of those, maybe not. The agency is too aggressive about meeting all the qualifications. Private sector allows for a good fit, even if the candidate isn't a match to the wish list. They realized the process would not result in hiring. I wonder why applicants would be saying that. Maybe it's taking too long. They're just feeling like 3 months. They're never going to hire for this position. Maybe they filled it internally. Maybe you did fill it internally and we didn't get back to the candidates, and they're probably not going to come again. It was asking too much. I felt like it was a waste of my time. They were demanding an unnecessary level of experience. I just didn't feel like I should apply, and worried that even though I would be interviewed, I wasn't qualified. So we know that half the job seekers have started and not finished it. To better qualify their experience, we asked job seekers to describe these worst and these best parts, and I'm sure you see those reflected here. All right, best practices. So timely communication, honest feedback, the job requirements, consider applicants without government experience if they have the same experience in other fields or industries. Remember talented applicants for future vacancies if they're not qualified for the current posting. These elements are essential in building the positive employer brand and future recruitment events. All right. So in summary, although government jobs did see an increase, as Stephanie alluded to earlier, we're still facing those challenges. We're still facing those challenges and recovering from pre-pandemic levels. We're still facing those challenges of before the pandemic, having those top quartiles of jobs where maybe we had those 100, 103 applicants, and those low quartile of jobs where we saw four applicants that are applying for the jobs. And then when you break it down to qualifications, our numbers looked more like 1.5 or 1.3 were actually qualified for the job. So those are some scary numbers. Those are some things that we really need to look at. Fortunately, there are best practices you can start implementing to better address some of these challenges. There are also software solutions that can help you source talent, better positions for your jobs, enhance your job appeal, optimize your hiring process. These examples include government job boards like governmentjobs.com, post jobs, where your ideal candidates are searching for those job opportunities, candidate relationship management software like Attract. You cannot possibly staff your way out of this. These things that we're dealing with. You could not have enough recruiters, and you could not have enough HR folks or even hiring managers. So Attract works in the background to help that candidate management experience. And then applicant tracking systems like Insight. You want this to be fast. You want to have the information at your fingertips and be able to understand who's in your buckets and move the candidates along quickly. These NEOGOV tools can definitely help you, help your employer brand, help you attract the more qualified candidates, accomplish more with less resources, and hopefully lead to, a little bit of relief on the cycle of burnout and turnover. So I know that was a lot of information that came at you. So Stephanie and I have a lot more data because we did just do our fragile set of hiring report. So we welcome any questions about the presentation. We will entertain those at this time.
Yeah, thank you so much, Reed. Before I jump into, or you know what, I'll jump into the questions now. I do want to let everyone know that one of the questions that we got throughout the presentation was if you'll get the deck afterwards. Yes, the answer is yes. We will share the presentation deck afterwards, as well as a number of other things. So stay tuned. I'll share that after this section here. But let me pull up some of the really great questions because there were some awesome ones. So let's see. Someone had said, which we haven't used the data this way yet or looked at the data this way yet, but they said that they were curious to see the applicant trend over the last 10 years. So going back even further pre-pandemic or of course years into the future. So excited to see or stay tuned rather to see what that looks like as we dig into our data more.
Yeah, and Stephanie, if I could just get into that question a little bit. So, I think about, probably how much more I should have looked at conversion rates. I wish I would have started that sooner, looking at the specific jobs, the specific applicants for those jobs and seeing how they were converting. I have a very distinct, memory of we were really struggling with people to staff our park rangers. And, you could see that people were applying, but they just we weren't converting. We were not getting enough people to fill the seats. The agency was frustrated. Job seekers were frustrated. And, we realized that there was a requirement for a science class that was really holding this up. And, I think we all knew that, but when you looked at those applicant rates, when you could say, this is how many people are looking, this is how many people are applying, and this is how it's happening, that was a very persuasive way to have the conversation with the hiring entity or maybe that hiring manager that was feeling really bought into that requirement that, we're fighting against two opposable things right now. So looking at that applicant data, not just in the aggregate over the past 10 years, but also specifically for these jobs classes, is a really good tool to have.
Yeah, awesome. And then this was a great question. I thought, I don't know that we have the data specifically, but the question was, has there been a change in the number of people choosing to get a degree or one degree or another? Could people be surveying the job market and saying, yikes? My assumption immediately is yes, that people are looking at the job market today and choosing whether to get a degree or not based on what they're looking at. But I wonder if you have experience with some of that as well, Reed, or having heard about it from your colleagues.
Yeah, I mean, I think the thing about government jobs is, we're a reflection of the population, right? So if you just think about the people that you know and what they're doing habitually, a
Right.
lot of great colleagues that, went and got degrees for various circumstances, some of which they would not use. I was a marketing person, and the internet was being born during marketing, so anything I learned was pretty much out the door. I was going through my schooling, so all that to say, we are definitely a reflection of our population, so we can't forget about that. Are people hesitating more on going after certain degrees or entering into four-year degrees, because of some of this conversation in the marketplace about not needing the degree? I don't know that we're seeing that bear out quite yet. But I do think that, we have a need for workers, and we want to make sure that, as this landscape continues to unfold, we're saying, hey, we want everyone. We want talented people, regardless of degrees, to deliver these services. How do we let them know that our door's open to them?
Yeah, I love that. These questions are awesome. I'm going back through them. So this one is, how do I convince my hiring manager that hiring
Mhm.
employees that require some training is beneficial in the long run? Most of mine seem to want someone that can come in and start getting work done with minimal effort from the hiring manager because they're so busy. Any insight on that one?
Yeah, yeah, absolutely. I mean, I feel that, definitely, in the hiring that we do at NEOGOV, you're already sort of strapped. It's a hard argument to have. I would say that, you know, they need to play the long game. Hopefully you do sort of have some of the data to have them look at their hiring statistics. Like,
Sure.
think not only thinking about, what's happening with their conversion rate, but how much of their time are they spending handling turnover? Because maybe somebody came in with the right requirements, but they're not the right cultural fit, so you kind of gave on that and you regret it, So, I think having them look at their data is a really good thing, and having them have some support on the training plans. We all know that in government, like, training is one of the first things to go when you're looking at budget cuts. But I really think, any support you could offer with training plans is going to make them feel a lot better. And that, their goal is to keep someone, as long as they can in the job. So experience doesn't always translate to how long they're going to stay in that job.
Yeah, absolutely. Another question was back to, actually, no, we'll stick with this one. So, how do you highlight stability in a genuine way on a job description? Putting you on the spot a little, but I like that one.
Yeah, that's a really good question. First thing I'll say, and this is not trying to avoid the answer, but I would say let's not forget that our current employees are our best advocates to be an employee. So I know we've talked a lot about hiring here and the importance of that, but let's not forget the importance of, shepherding employees, having a good culture for them, giving them good learning opportunities, making sure that we're doing performance reviews so they understand and get praised for what's going really well, or have corrections for things that aren't going well, because people don't want to fail in their jobs. They want to do well, but sometimes they just may need that light bulb, that review, that conversation to know what's going on. So really, our employees are our best representatives of our workforce. How do you promote stability? Maybe you talk about some of your turnover rates. Maybe you have the, highlight some of the, success stories in your organization so they can identify with the people that they work with. You talk about balance, right? People understand what balance is. Balance, stability. You talk about benefits. You talk about work-life balance. That's going to give people a sense of stability.
Yeah, no, I totally agree. And from the marketing perspective too, right? I think using some kind of, it might be, I don't know, it might be kind of new and edgy, but if you used a quote from one of your, one of your employees who was really excited about working for all of you, if they have been there for a long time, you include their name potentially or their title and the number of years they've been there. It's an instant sort of nod to how stable your agency is. And that would interest me if I was applying for the role for sure. So I love that. Okay. So this was when you were talking about that study, Reed, where we updated the job descriptions and we saw an 18% increase in the number of applications. It was, what were those 3 states? So it was, I believe it was Michigan, the Commonwealth of Pennsylvania, and Washington. Is that correct?
Correct.
Okay. Awesome. I just wanted to clarify that one. Someone else said, my main difficulty is scheduling. Roles are union-based. 3 times a year, the employees bid on their hours worked, weekends, weekend days, and vacation. Any suggestions how to sell that as a good thing?
In terms of the scheduling?
I think so, yeah. In terms of positioning the job in a way that's appealing, while, you still have to bid on all that.
Right. Yeah. I mean, I think that's where you lean into the stability, the predictability of the jobs, the ability to potentially take overtime shifts, highlighting some of your career successes. I think that's a really tough thing when you're looking at 24/7 institutions where there's going to be holidays, there's going to be night shifts, there's going to be weekends, you're going to have, bidding. So I think you kind of sell the whole picture, right? And, and I think it's also to remember that as you're working with your unions, as you're thinking about that, the unions have a vested interest in having members, right? They want members. So how are you looking at your data? Like if you're seeing that there's a large exodus of people, like after 3 or 4 years, maybe you need to look at your union contracts. What's happening at that time that either you need to remind them of some of the next gates that are coming that are attractive to them from a scheduling standpoint, or whatever the case may be. But it's really important that those relationships with your unions are strong, so you can have discussions and not feel beholden to, and you can take data to them and say, we're seeing an issue here. Let's collaborate. Let's work together to sell the benefits of that next gate, or let's change that gate. But I think leaning into the overall things that those job seekers are looking for are going to help you through some of those more gnarly issues.
Awesome. A couple more questions. We're almost through it here, but these have been awesome from everyone. Everyone's still really engaged. So I like this one. Do you think that in-house employee referral programs are a viable recruiting tool to increase hiring?
I do. I think if I were asked to administrate that in the government, it would be difficult, right? So I do think that, because I know that we have a lot of success with our program internally here at NEOGOV for referring people. People get excited about it. Also they're recommending the company, hopefully not just for what that incentive is, but because they feel like this is a place where they want to put their family and friends. So I do think it's a good program. You have to know personally whether you have, one, the leadership support to do that, the budget to support it, and the administrative capacity to handle something like that. Because once you put programs out there, especially in government, my opinion is it's really hard to pull them back. So think about all those things that would go into the program, and know that I think it does produce good things, but you really have to have the right environment to support it in order to make it work.
Yeah. You mentioned earlier, Reed, a program where you partnered with State University back in Pennsylvania, where you partnered with state universities to provide discounts for employees. Do you know what, or recall what the discount was? Like how much you offered off?
Yeah, so this was just getting up and running as I was leaving. It was actually one of my last tasks from the governor before I was on my way. So yes, we partnered for online classes only. Our state system at that time, and still presumably is going through really bolstering their online programs, realizing that was a real need in the marketplace, wanting to drive more attention there. So they had a vested interest, and I believe we gave 50% discounts on online courses, if I'm remembering correctly. And the interesting part of that conversation that I had with the person I was developing the program with, she said that there are some classes where the attendance is so low, but we have this professor, we would give you even deeper discounts. That's a hard way to administrate the program instead of having that one number. So they were really looking at their portfolio, looking at their classes, looking at where they wanted to drive more people there so they could, make it a good business proposition for them. But I believe it was a 50% off online classes, if I'm remembering correctly.
Awesome. That's an awesome discount. Okay, this person said, my organization has considered performance pay. Can you share any information or success stories from other government agencies? Do you have that in your pocket?
Yeah, Stephanie, I think this is something that we can get back to folks with. I never did performance. We did not do performance pay when I was in my government job, and you know, and bonuses were sort of a four-letter word. You know, we talk about bonuses, got a lot of heartburn, you know, from the representatives about that. So, you know, I think it would be really good, you know, to maybe talk to some larger entities who have done that. How did they start? How did they determine the rates? Did they do forced ranking? You know, that's a great topic, you know, for another time. I don't have any personal experience with implementing it, but, you know, certainly, you know, something to explore and to talk to people who have done it before.
Awesome. Yeah, and one last one, Reed, and you may or may not have experience with this as well, but flexibility and just, you know, making job hours and the jobs themselves a bit more flexible. How might you recommend convincing or proving a case to leadership to offer flexibility when the organization itself or the agency itself might be a bit more hesitant towards offering flexible working?
Absolutely, absolutely. And you definitely saw this in pockets. You saw some people who were really on the extreme that you're like, well, maybe you should at least be in the office a couple days a week, given what you do. And some people who were just, no, everybody needs to be in the office. You know, it really varied. And so, you know, part of our job in HR is really doing a lot of convincing, making these arguments. I always think when you can point to other examples, you know, that's very helpful when they can talk. Like if you know of a government counterpart who has done that before, you know, obviously you do some pre-work, you know, they can talk to them, ask questions, you know, especially if they're tracking their data well, you know, in terms of, you know, whatever their measurements may be, but start with a pilot. I always think starting with a pilot is a good way to go. Start with a pilot, track the success. You know, sometimes, you know, we need to play the long game and, you know, do those small things to do a proof of concept and see how it works. So that's how I would recommend it. You know, I think the argument there is, you know, if we don't try something, we might be losing these employees. You know, what do you think about? Let's check it out and see how it goes.
Yeah, I love that. And I noted those two, the performance pay and the flexible jobs one. So I am happy to follow back up with Rob and Candace. I'll do some research of my own and reach out.
Great. I'm pretty, you know, and Stephanie, I'm pretty sure Tennessee recently launched pay for performance. So, yep.
I'll take a look there.
Not recently, I think a while ago. Time goes fast. But
time does go fast. It feels like it was the pandemic yesterday, and here we are talking about, you know, we're almost just as far out as we have data for before. So anyways, thank you all again so much for being with us today. Thank you, Reed, for answering so many wonderful questions. We've had tons of engagement throughout the webinar. I'm really excited to share all of this data with all of you. Like I mentioned earlier, you will receive the slides afterwards. You'll also receive a link to download the full report. And you will, I have a dog that wants to join the webinar with us today, so apologies for that. But you will receive the link to download, you'll receive the recording, the slides, and for those of you who want to take advantage of the SHRM credit, we will send you the code for that as well. So all good stuff. Thank you again for being here, and thank you again, Reed. This has been wonderful.
My pleasure. Thank you.
Bye, everyone.
Bye, everybody.